Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jody, and today I'm going to take you along as I paint a birthday card for one of my really good friends. I started off by taking a piece of watercolor paper and folding it in half, and then I am going to be grabbing my painter's tape and taping down a border so that the floral pattern that I paint doesn't bleed into the edges. I'm also going to use that tape to create a space in the middle of where I'm going to be painting so I can write the words happy birthday later on. I realized I'm not the best at putting tape on parallel to the edge, so I'm just using my eraser. It's about 1/4 inch thick, and marking along the border so I can line up the tape a little bit straighter. One of the benefits to taping down edges of a watercolor painting is it actually prevents the paper from curling if you're going to be using a lot of water. The painting I end up doing isn't too wet of a painting. I'm definitely doing wet on dry technique for the most part. And so I didn't really need it to keep the paper from curling. However, when you are doing more water on a watercolor painting, like a wet on wet technique or many layers of watercolor, then you need to be taping down and anchoring the paper. Otherwise, edges tend to curl or bow up or down, depending on the grain of the paper. So it's a good tip if you are just starting out with watercolors to tape down your edges, and then that way it stops the paper from warping. I'm starting off with an orangey yellow color, and I'm just making general oval football-y shapes for the petals and making sure that they meet at the bottom. I'm doing 3 or 4 petals per flower and leaving the ones toward the outside of the flower a little bit skinnier and the petals toward the middle fatter to make it look like the flower is going around and the petals on the edge are going around. I am scattering these flowers all throughout the top and bottom of the paper. I'm going to start off by painting all of the flowers first and then adding in the greenery afterwards. Here's a close-up of how I kind of get that shape. I sort of do a light line to make the football shape and then fill it in. Next, I'm going to come back around to these colors and add a deeper orange toward the bottom of the petal. I come back soon enough that the water hasn't dried so that the darker orange sort of bleeds up into the petal. But if you're not as quick of a painter, then I would go and do the dark orange each batch of flowers you paint. I was painting quickly enough that the paint hadn't dried all the way down by the time I got back to it with the darker color. Now that I've cleaned a spot off on my palette, I'm going to be mixing a bright pinkish color. I'm going to be painting in some more droopy petaled flowers. So I'm going to start by making a long bean oval shape for the petal that would be closest to the viewer. And then I'm going to paint some petals sort of radiating out from that point, getting shorter and shorter toward the back of the flower. I'm imagining that there's a middle of the flower, so I'm leaving a big round gap in the inside of the petals. And later I'll come back and paint in a brown middle to this flower. So I'm painting a couple of bloomed flowers, and then underneath I'm going to paint in just a little flower bud. It's kind of an organic lumpy shape. And I just imagine that all the petals are curled in on themselves. I'll be repeating the technique that I used last time, where I add a darker shade of a similar color at the base of the petals. Here's a close-up so you can see sort of how I leave that round gap in the shapes that I use for the flowers. This is a very loose painting. I'm not following any guide or anything. I'm just letting the shapes be very natural, and if they bleed together, so be it. Keeping it very loose and very natural. That's the best part about painting nature and florals, is perfection is not needed. To that pinkish color that I had mixed for the last flowers. I'm adding some like really bright violet color to it, and I'm gonna paint little groupings of these tiny little flowers. All I'm doing is that same little football shape and one skinny little leg, I guess, poking out from the one little shape. So they look more like tiny little flower buds that are about to burst open. I'm adding some just sporadically wherever I feel like the color would look good. And later I'll be adding in some stems. So you can see I make that little football shape and then make a little leg that pops out the side. I'm going to come back in and add in a deeper purple color to the base of each flower, just like I did with the rest of the petals, just to give it a little more dimension again. Mixing kind of a deep blue color, and I'll be painting some flowers that look almost like lavender, but instead of making them purple, since I already used a purplish color for the last flower, I'm making them more of a deep blue. So I'm just mixing a deep blue color and just dotting little bits of paint up in a line. I'm trying to make the angles a little varied in each line of dots. Later, when I paint the stems, I will bring the stem right up into the grouping of dots, so it looks like they're actually growing off the stem. But for now, it just looks like a bunch of little dots in a line. I confess, when I did that first set, I thought, oh my gosh, I've ruined the painting. But sometimes with painting and any art really, you just have to get past the scary part where it looks a little bit ugly, and then after that, things tend to come together. It's a trust the process kind of thing, especially with watercolors. they tend to do their own thing, blend and meld. And the less you worry about being perfect with it, the more beautiful that your art turns out. It is a water-based medium, so it definitely begs for you to go with the flow. I'm now adding in stems. I choose a different shade of green for each flower. These orange flowers are getting a deep forest green, and all I'm doing is lightly dragging my brush down the page, letting it weeble and wobble as it wills. But at the base of the flower, I'm just adding a little bit of green, so it looks like the flower is connected to the stem. Then I'm going to come in and do the leaves, which are just a long oval leaf shape. For the pink flowers, I'm adding in a lighter shade of green, and the leaves for this flower are going to be a little more jagged. So I bring the stem down, and then I draw some horizontal or perpendicular lines to the stem, and then I bring a line through the jagged lines to make it look like a leaf. So here's a close-up. I do the long line out and then some parallel lines to make it look like a jagged little leaf. I use a lot of water when I'm doing those leaves, so they sort of blob together and look a little more cohesive and not just like a bunch of crisscross lines. For these lavender stems, these blue lavender stems, I'm using a more olive green color, and then I'm using a more medium green color for the small pinkish purplish flowers. After looking at the overall composition, I decided that on the bottom half there needed to be some more flowers, so I just added in some of those pinkish purplish flower buds again, and then went back in and drew their stems, and I felt like it balanced the composition of the painting a bit more. It seemed a little too blank in that corner. Now I have my metallic watercolors open, and I'm going to be doing some of my favorite, which is splattering metallic paint all over my desk. I mean the painting, but like also my desk. So I chose sort of this deep pink metallic color to splatter over it, and then I'm going to choose sort of a dark green metallic color to splatter over it. That same dark green splatter color I'm going to be using in a little bit to paint over the words "Happy Birthday." Is there anything more satisfying than peeling tape off of a painting? I don't know. It's so enjoyable to do. Now I'm erasing the pencil marks where I had measured out where to line up the tape, and then grabbing my pencil and lightly sketching out the words "Happy Birthday" in cursive. I'm going to paint over it in that green metallic color, and it's tricky to do lettering in watercolor, so it doesn't come out the best, and you'll see later that I choose to add a shadow to the letters using a marker. That way it looks a little cleaner because I actually really struggled with doing the lettering in the watercolor. However, the friend I'm making this for is a very good friend, and I'm sure she won't mind. I'm trying to do the letters in kind of a script handwriting where each downstroke is thicker than what would be considered the upstroke of the lettering. I had a hard time controlling the flow of this metallic paint. It tends to be a little bit thicker than other watercolors. I by no means have like the highest quality art supplies. I just buy what I can afford and use them as often as I can. So it was a bit of a challenge, like I said, to make this lettering look nice, and I decided that it just wasn't clean enough. So I come back in with a marker and add in some shadowing. How you add shadowing to letters is you choose one side of the letters, whether that be the left side, the right side, top, bottom. I happen to choose the right side of the letters. And you imagine the light coming from the opposite direction. So you just add the shadow on one side of each of the letters as you go along, and then it gives it sort of a little 3D pop. Well, here is the finished product. I hope you enjoyed painting along with me today and seeing some simple watercolor techniques, and maybe you can create something similar in the future. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you back here sometime soon. Bye!